Welcome to the OverChurched podcast for people who love Christ but struggle with Christians.
Or struggle with their marriage, or struggle with people in general. We're here for you. We get it. All right. This is going to be a good one. First of all, I want to start off with, tell us something new. We're in season 3.
Oh, yeah. Our name.
Oh, yeah. I'm Justin.
I'm Delicia.
Can we just put like lower thirds? We can add lower thirds. But Delicia, tell us something new you've picked up this past year. Something new that you're excited about.
Oh, excited about?
Yeah, something. Yeah. Just something. What's something fun, exciting?
Just started. So.
Oh, that's great. I kind of meant in context of like since we last did OverChurched.
Yeah, in the season. Something new. I got to try the 75 challenge. That was
75 hard?
Yep. 75 hard challenge. That was interesting. Oh, and I did a Spartan race that I had to get out of because
ambulanced out.
Yeah.
Carted out.
Like what is that? The medical
emergency team.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's been a year of physical stuff that I've been trying.
Had you ever done it before?
No.
And how far did you make it? I think you were at least past day 40 something. You were over halfway done.
Oh, with the challenge?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was day 40. 38.
38?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's 38 more days than you'd ever done before of 2 workouts a day, sticking to a diet, like all those things. That's a 38% improvement. Which actually you're doing better than me on the carnivore diet. I forgot about that. I too participated in the 75 hard challenge. I completed it.
I knew you were just waiting.
I also attempted a Spartan race and completed it. However, I think if we hadn't done those things, the yite people things, yit.
What? Yeah.
I think those things really helped our mental endurance for everything else. I think we could pinpoint that as like a turning point in our personal lives.
Yeah, it was.
We would never be trying this carnivore diet if we hadn't done those things. We wouldn't even have thought about that. So proud of you. I'm proud of us. We did that. I thought though, I forgot about that, honestly. I thought you were going to talk about the fact that we're now aspiring professional pickleball players. What? What?
I don't want to talk about pickleball.
Why?
No. It shows our communication on the court all the way around. You're coaching me the whole time. I'm trying
to help you.
No.
I'm trying to help you.
You'll coach me into the wrong thing doing it. You'll be like, don't get it. I don't get it. And then we lose. And then I'm like,
whoa. No. We lose the point, not the game. I don't try to blame a whole game on one. I think that me trying to help sometimes I overhelp in terms of I should have just let you. I got to trust that I've coached you up right. So, but it's still, anyway, I think I have fun.
Yeah, it's fun. I make it fun.
I have fun enduring pickleball with you.
Enduring pickleball?
I'm out here trying to carry our family on my back and my paddle.
Stop it. That's why you won't let your daughter play. But anyways.
Not a good enough parent to be able to competitively play pickleball with my daughter. It would break.
For listening. You just keep rambling.
You sound like the Senator Byrd who criticized Martin Luther King, a rambling rouser.
Okay.
That's what they said about Dr. King.
In your message, you did say that.
In my research.
Your research.
I'm just saying, I don't think you want to use language.
Anyways, talking about that, we wanted to talk about politics on this episode.
Well, we're filming this episode the day after the inauguration.
Yeah.
And I feel like the world's on fire again.
I think it's too early.
Shout out LA and the fires that are actually happening. And praying for people affected by that. But in all seriousness, I will say this past year has been crazy from that aspect when it comes to church. Because this is giving vibes again of like, remember when it was like, what was that 2019, 2020, when it was like you had the George Floyd stuff happening, you had the vaccination stuff happening,
Yeah.
and it was like Christians were getting super divided again. And then we kind of went through a few years of like, okay, we can coexist, you know what I mean? We can kind of, but then this election, it went right back. It felt like we took steps backwards instead of learning from our past mistakes.
Yeah. I think that we've had different, people affected by this topic. I think it surprised me within our church how us trying to stay in unity has been more of the major priority because of the fact that we've seen now, we have a very split church of what they feel they are voting for and where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And then, there's people right now, like they're mourning the fact that who's president and things of that nature. So, I think for OverChurched people, there's probably a lot of people on listening onto this podcast right now of just the fact that you've probably left the church or left the belief of why the church exists. I remember meeting a couple who started with us early on and still with us, that the husband particularly left his last church because of how much politics was being preached over the pulpit.
Yeah.
So it's a fine line that we find ourselves walking on, right? Like when it comes to the importance of it, and then just the
not letting it turn into a political platform. This is still a pulpit, not a Republican or Democrat.
Yeah. And we're in the state of Arizona.
Yeah.
It's been very different here.
Yeah.
If we're in Cali, where we're from, it would have been vastly different there. But where we're at, very much so, it's very open of like people want to talk about this, or they want to they feel that it's okay to bash people for who they voted for or anything of that nature. So it's very divided in that way. But what I think most importantly we should share is the fact that how have we tried to stay in unity, and where has that been for you? Because you do the majority of the preaching. So how has that been preaching in this season?
Well, I remember like before, if we were to back it up, what my mindset was coming into planning a church.
Yeah.
I remember thinking like, I never want to be that church that is building their identity around politics and who you should vote for, how Jesus would vote, or all these things. Because at the end of the day, it becomes divisive. But then I found myself also on that side of the spectrum where it's like, well, anything you say technically can be used against you as being political. You know what I mean? Like if it's like, it's crazy how no matter what, people will find a way to be upset or offended or feel like you're doing this too much, or you're not doing this enough. Like I think that's kind of been the hardest thing about preaching every Sunday during election cycles is there's this expectation of either this is my completely safe space where I don't have to hear anything else about, abortion or racism or LGBTQ issues, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or on the other end, you're like, this is a space where I need to hear what does the Bible say? Like, how am I supposed to be? You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a weird dichotomy to be in as a communicator of the gospel. And so I've done my best to just, okay, God, what I feel like you want for this church. You know what I mean? Like, we're not trying to be the church that does it that way or this way. It's like, God, for this house, what do you want? And I found myself trying to just constantly preach unity. But I'll never forget, there was this one time I did a chapel at a Christian school and they invited me to come and they said, hey, we want you to preach on unity. And it was during 2020 or 2021. And they're like, we want you to preach on unity. And I'm like, okay. And so I typed up a sermon, I sent it to them, and then I preached it. And I talked about, hey, in this climate that we're living in right now, you have people that are very passionate about the phrase Black Lives Matter. You have people that are passionate about the phrase that all lives matter. You have people that are passionate about the rights of women. You have people that are passionate about the rights of the unborn. You have people that are passionate about Stephen Curry. Then you have sinners. And I talked about, like, at the end of the day, what the Bible talks about is not to allow anything to become a stumbling block and stop you from, being an ambassador of Christ, from preaching the gospel or loving your neighbor. And so I did it. Chapel went great. Kids were solid. A couple of days later, I get an email from some random person I've never heard of. And they're like, "We loved your chapel. I'm so sorry about the backlash you got." And I was like, "What are you talking about? I was about to coach our daughter's basketball game." Maybe I can't coach her in pickleball. I coached her through basketball, and that was hard. But I got the email, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you give context? But I'm glad you like the chapel. And she was like, "Oh, you must not have heard." And she forwarded me an email that the school had sent out to all the parents right after I did chapel. And it basically said, "We brought in a guest speaker who was asked to preach on unity. And he said some things that could be understood as endorsing cultural messaging." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And then she responded like, "Everyone understood you just had these ultra side of a demographic that got triggered because you said XYZ." And I was like, I didn't endorse anything. I just said, this is the reality of life, that what these kids are dealing with is like, you have these two perspectives that are going on. And then so I talked to the principal a short time later, and he's like, "Hey, I apologize. That was kind of on me. We had, these past 2 years, we haven't talked anything about George Floyd or racism or Black Lives Matter or anything that's been going on. We were waiting on something. And I'm like, you realize your little teenagers have TikTok,
right?
Like, why the heck are their parents paying for a Christian school if they're going to have to get all their theology from the internet and from social media? Like, if you don't speak to them, somebody is."
Yeah.
And I just remember being so irritated, because I was like, well, how the hell are kids supposed to learn a biblical worldview if the church or the schools that represent the church are too scared to, Christians are too scared to teach them or say anything because they don't want to trigger anybody?
This is a predominantly white school that you had went to, which here in the state of Arizona, that's what you mainly sometimes go to. I think it's also fair to say that in that heightened sensitivity of a time, it was, you're a Black man trying to talk about unity to the predominantly white kids, when they are hearing things differently at home. So I also believe there was a lot of things that were up against you that you didn't even know. And what they thought they were doing was bringing unity, because they brought some diversity onto the platform, but not through the diversity of thought. And they wanted a face, not a mind or a mouth. And I think that that's so important to remembering when, because I believe that there's so many people who have left church because of the fact that they assumed what the pastor was, the leadership
should have said, or
voted, or however the case might be. And I definitely think that we've seen both ends of it. We've seen the overly
like you can't tell if this is a church or a national convention for a political party.
Political party, or the opposite of, like, they don't say
what is sin.
And they kind of just ignore what's going on in the world, and people don't like that either. Right. So I think it's our job and it's all of our responsibility to helping us have a biblical view on this, for sure. I believe that the pastors that are going in this and about the biblical way, I think, in honoring and still being prayerful about it, is doing a great job. And that's what God's burdened them to do. I don't think that that's every pastor's calling.
Or I agree. I agree.
In that way. But I think, why do you think that God had asked you to primarily speak and focus on the fact of unity within our church?
Well, I think that I like what you said. Like, I'm at a point now where I'm not demonizing someone that feels a conviction to preach from a very strong political perspective anymore.
Yeah.
Like I think I went onto that when we started the church. I kind of put these blinders on of like, that'll never be us. And I still believe that will never be us. However, I'm more empathetic to everybody to understanding that people have to walk out their own convictions and know who they're called to reach. And who am I to judge? You know, I think about scripture like John the Baptist. He created a whole movement around telling people, repent, you brood of vipers.
Yeah.
You know, judgment is coming, essentially. And then you had John the Beloved, who was constantly just writing letters that were encouraging and they were challenging, but he was like just loving people to repentance. And so I think you just have to know who has God graced you to be. And so I say that because I just feel a strong conviction that Legacy Church is not a accidentally diverse church. It is a very, like, that is the grace we have.
Yeah.
That is the calling that we're called to be a bridge and to bring people together. And for us, diversity isn't just, I'm Black, you're Hispanic, you know, we'll throw on a white worship leader. Our diversity is, no, I think totally different than you.
Yeah.
And I've had totally different experiences than you, but I still feel a call to love, live, and lead like Jesus and in community with you. And so once I felt confident about who I feel called to be as a leader and who I feel our church is called to be, that caused me to not shy away from communicating things that could be perceived as political in a way, if that's how you want to perceive it. But the end of the day, you know, our theme verse for this year is 2 Corinthians 5:20. We are Christ's ambassadors. God is making his appeal through us. We speak for Christ when we plead, come back to God. And I feel like if we're going to get people to come back to God, I want the Democrats to come back to God. I want the Republicans to come back to God. I want the independents to come back to God. And so that was kind of my driving motivator of, I'm not going to not say things because I'm afraid that you're going to twist it or make it political if it's really just biblical.
Yeah.
But I'm also not going to build a platform that idolizes or focuses just on a singular party or on a single or single issues from a party when it's so nuanced for a lot of people. And so I think the diversity of our church helps me as a pastor understand, like, I'm just called to preach to y'all. Like,
Yeah.
I can't, this isn't for the world necessarily, but within our church, it was grieving me when I would see things like, you can't be a Christian and vote for so-and-so. And I'm like, no, there's Christians who I know, they love Jesus, they love people in our church, and they're voting for so-and-so, or they're voting for the other, you know? And so I wanted to remind our church that the heart of Jesus does not change every 4 years.
Funny that you said that, because I thought about that when you just said, like, I wonder if what you just said about, like, the heart of Jesus is not in a political party, right? And is it that the fact that, most importantly, it's about having people have fallen away from having the heart of Jesus.
Yeah.
What politics has shown us and exposed in such a way
Is what has our heart.
Is what has their heart.
Yeah.
And so, but nobody wants to pause and reflect on that because they're so driven by their politics and agenda of what this is, that you can't love God. He says there's two great commandments: to love God and then love his people, or love your neighbor
as yourself. Yeah.
As yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and how are you supposed to love your neighbor as yourself? In the fact that you're saying that you can only love the people who vote like you and who think like you and come from the same experiences as you, or anything of that nature, and or look like you.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That's not the heart of Jesus.
I'll give you a better one, or not a better one, another one. What about when Jesus says, love your enemies?
Yeah.
So if you excommunicate anyone who you consider an enemy, you know you have no room now to love them. You've just broken the commandment of Jesus.
Yeah.
because Jesus would almost be like, keep your friends close and your enemies closer for the sake of being me to them. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Jesus never kicked Judas out of the group, even
Right.
though he knew from the jump that Judas was not for him,
Right.
or eventually would not be for him. Which is a whole nother issue, because in Judas's mind, he was actually more for Jesus than Jesus was for Jesus. He thought Jesus had got off. Anyway, but I think when it comes back to that, like, I think the fact that we actually have true relationships and friends with people who we know love us and our family. Like, there's people that we would, like, I don't even know where our kids were tonight until you just told me right before we started this. But they could have been with friends who voted either way. We would have felt 100% safe with our kids, our daughters, our son, and regardless of how those people voted. And then when we have like conversations, like last night, we had a great conversation with some of our friends who were just expressing like some very strong concerns about certain things. And it brought so much empathy and clarity to us in terms of, oh, this is why people are uncomfortable, or why people are worried about.
Yeah. And these are close friends.
Yeah.
And they're like in tears. They're upset. And it's like, wow. Like, and it all started from just, I was so baffled by the fact that, because it doesn't affect me personally in that way, does not mean that it doesn't affect my neighbor who I'm supposed to love. And these people are our neighbors in that way. And I just felt that this, like, wow, okay, like, even though it doesn't affect me personally, but I can mourn with you. And that also is true of what God has asked of us as well.
Mourn with those who mourn.
Mourn with those who mourn. So when it doesn't personally affect us, but then yet you have one of your closest friends then
it does affect you.
It does. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Then it's, I need to mourn with them, even though that the fact that, like, it might not come out the way that they think, and I might not see it that way, but I just see how it's affecting them.
Yeah.
And, people have shut off that empathy for people and the love for them. But like, which we've talked about before, and just empathy. I think that anything that we are dealing with within our church is to helping people. I would say that you really need to search and wrestle with God on that truth of knowing God asked you to come, to be here, and to go out into his greatest commandment, and his great commission. Those are the two things that he's asked of you to living out, and that he's commanded of us. And I think we've lost that within this whole world of us wanting to be on the same page and knowing where people vote. And you've gotten a lot of backlash of that. Like,
what's
people
funny, it's crazy. Like, no matter what I say, I almost read that. Remember that long email of a thing I got just preaching unity, and then someone's like, it's obvious who you voted for. And I was
people
like,
have come at you. That I'm like, I've seen the sides of people that I'm like, wow, like you just assume that you know him in some type of way.
Yeah.
And that's what's crazy to me. And then also the assumptions of people thinking that, oh, I was going to leave because I thought you voted this way or whatever. Like,
I didn't realize that's what shocked me. I didn't realize how immature Christians were. Like, I knew if I go on the internet and look in the comment section, like, it's just chaos. Like you almost do it just to remind yourself how much the world needs Jesus, because you're like, y'all are crazy. The sad thing is when you look at the Christian comment section, you're like, wait, y'all know Jesus. Y'all are still crazy. Yeah. And that's what blew me away, is like the immaturity to not, I can't, like, if how you vote is the sole identity of like your heart, your character, your being, is like how you vote, like that summarizes your existence. And that's so crazy to me. And what's funny is when people say it, because we vote our personal convictions, and then people just assume. And here's a shocker. Me and you voted differently on certain issues. That's like, you want to talk about like
You're
how to
gonna
have
have everybody
unity.
coming at us that we are a divided household. But
They can, well, actually, which is,
you are still the king, priest, and prophet of our household.
yeah,
And
but I'm not
everything.
a,
But I get
you're,
labeled as the Hispanic crazy one that is like,
whoa,
oh, she's on her own. Like she thinks on her own. That's not
no,
what it
well,
is.
no, I mean, and
We just have, as a woman, it's different for me versus you as a man and how we think. We
yeah,
are,
and well, and it's not even about male or female issues. It's just about, we didn't check each other on how you were voting for local government,
No.
local officials, but because at the end of the day, this isn't a primary issue in our life. Like it's not a primary focus of our life. The primary focus of our life is how are we actively loving God, loving each other, leading other people. You know what I mean? And so I honestly think, again, if someone were, I think you're wrong. I think that most people, I pray, who listen to this podcast are mature enough to be inspired by that, as opposed to thinking that we have a divided household. If you take away from this conversation that we have a divided household because we vote differently, you're an idiot. Like, you're exactly the most immature person who we're talking about, like, we can't relate to, because I think this is a closer representation of what the church should actually be, to where you vote your convictions, I vote my convictions. Our strongest conviction is for each other. Like, no matter what, we wouldn't allow our voting to get in between our marriage. We wouldn't allow it to get in between our parenting. We wouldn't allow it to get in between our faith.
But some people have, and some people
And that's
do.
what I think is, so that's, okay, so then you go back to my preaching. I'm fighting against immaturity within our church. I can't control what happens in other people's churches. I can't control what happens, on social media. But for our house, we will be united, even though we're diverse. We will be a unapologetic, diverse church that is still united on the things that actually matter, which is loving, living, and leading like Jesus. And it's through our diversity that we're able to do that. It's like we need ultra conservative Christians who can love, live, and lead like Jesus in a way that doesn't idolize conservatism and that can bring people closer to the cross. And we need ultra liberal Christians who can love, live, and lead like Jesus and bring people from that demographic closer to the cross. And I think if legacy can be that place to where you're like, oh, wait, I thought y'all were like this. And you're like, no, we're not. We're actually, but you loved us, so you can't change your mind now. You know what I mean? I think that's really my vision for us, is that we would be that unicorn to where you can't tell. I don't know who he voted for. I don't know who she voted for, but they preach Jesus. They love people. So if I'm allowing that to become an issue, that's showing my heart. That's an idol for me, because God hasn't stopped using, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I think that that's a gift that I think God wants of us, is to love his people who are all different in this way. I think that is the most powerful thing that you can do. I don't think it's easy at times. Really, depending on your background and where you're from and how you're
and your experiences.
You're a human in that way. But for you to sit there and want to wrestle with God and to be like, but I know this is what your word says. I know this is what's true. I know this is what you've asked of me, to love my enemies. Okay, I gotta love my enemies then, even when it's uncomfortable, even when I'm like, man, I don't understand how you see it that way, but I'm gonna be empathetic then. God, help my heart to soften to this person, to hearing their concerns, to hearing how they feel. I think that has been what we just had this conversation with people who we love, is like, wow, that's what you're scared of. That's what's gonna happen. That's how you're feeling. Like, man, but even though we didn't vote the same, or they don't know that, they just are sharing their concerns about how they're feeling. It's like, man, I still can love you and you can still love me, because I'm here for you relationally. I want to bring unity regardless, because it doesn't matter how I voted. Jesus has asked us to be unified in this way. Unity isn't about, that's what people mess it up with. If anything, take away from this podcast is, unity does not mean that you agree. Unity is when actually you can be united when you are not from the same place, look the same, think the same, or vote the same. It's the indifference that really unifies you. And the enemy would love nothing more than to make everybody believe that we all got to look the same. And we all got to think the same. And if they're not for you, then they're against you. And that goes back to, we just saw a Facebook comment of somebody who uses his words to articulate things very neutrally. Then we got a friend of ours who we love and known for years that's very passionate about bashing anything that, on the internet that they don't agree with.
Yeah.
They're not loving in that way, right? But then we got somebody else that I personally knew, who's if you knew this person in person and had a relationship with them, they were so gentle, so kind, so sweet, but talking crazy in a comment of and being divisive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And in that moment, it saddens me for that person, because I'm like, that's not who you are.
Bro, social media.
That's not even who you
devil. It brings out the worst.
Yeah, that's not even who you are. And now nobody's going to be able to know who you really are.
Well, some people.
Because of the fact that you just made a comment against another Christian brother who was just sharing his thoughts about something that is deeply affecting him. And yet you've just taken that over social media. And so you just created this division. That's now.
Terrible.
Because he's not going to respect you. He's not going to want to talk to you.
Well, it goes against, you got me thinking about what Paul says. Paul says that if it causes my brother to sin, I won't do it. If anything causes my brother to stumble, even if it's not a sin for me, I won't do it. And I think we've lost the sight of recognizing that our opinions do not matter if it's at the expense of our brother's salvation. You know what I mean? That's why I will say that
even goes deep talking about what you watch. If you if that,
we were doing that. We were having friends over, and we were started watching something that was offensive to people, and we were like, we need to change this. You know what I mean? Yeah. And some of us felt desensitized to it, this is life. And then some of it, but at the end of the day, it's our desire to be entertained or our desire to whatever is not greater than our desire to have unity with our brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And if we can have that approach to movies, we should have that approach to voting. We should have that approach to, so anything, honestly, to where you can do anything, but not all things are beneficial.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost sight of that, because now everybody has this, right here. Well, if you're listening, I mean, everybody has a microphone and everybody has an opinion and everybody feels entitled to share it, or entitled to judge someone else who shares theirs. And I think that's what we're trying to change with our church, is making sure that, we don't lose potential souls over votes. We don't lose potential souls.
Reminding them, yeah.
Yeah.
Reminding them that unity is not easy. It's actually very hard.
Oh, our church would be bigger and easier if we leaned one way or the other.
Yep.
If I was the most pro-Trump pastor, and I'm black, bro, if I was a black pro-Trump pastor, I would blow this thing up. I would.
And where we're at.
I would in Arizona.
Yeah.
If I were to just go crazy with it, MAGA, you know what I mean? Make church great again. You know what I mean? We would go crazy. The giving would be crazy.
Yeah.
If I were to go the other way, if I were to have gone all in on Kamala, if I would have helped, hey, I'm going to do my part to make sure Kamala get her votes from our church. You know what I mean? If I would have went all in on that end, same thing, would have blown up. We would have been there.
Because then people want to support what's easy and what is convenient for them.
People are for people who are for them. But we didn't create a church to be for people more than we're for Jesus.
It's not about me and you and our votes either. It's about the fact that we're pointing you all to Jesus.
Yeah.
And we're saying, remember what this is about.
Yeah.
Remember who the one is who called us into this.
people should, if we committed to coming to church every day looking to die as opposed to looking to feel validated, churches would be way healthier. And I think that's kind of what, honestly, that's what we kind of committed to. We said we meet our churches in a gym, and we said we're embracing that this is a gym. We meet in a gym. And so in a gym, you wrestle, like you compete, you sweat, you get it hurt,
Yeah.
But you come back to the gym because you get stronger, you get better.
Yeah.
And so with our church, it's like, no, we were intentionally clear with the direction that we were going and who we are. We were also intentionally ambiguous with how people needed to apply that to their voting life.
Yeah.
Because we want people to be led by the Holy Spirit, not my spirit, not your spirit.
Yeah.
And I think that, I think
there's,
that's our crosses. We might not please, no matter what, we're going to piss off 50% of people in a way.
Yeah. Because
they're not going to know who we align for. But I think at the same time, we get to reach a lot more people because we haven't made politics an idol.
Yeah. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
I think if anybody listening, just to remembering, like, there's many churches like that are doing it well and communicating well and keeping politics to what politics are. And
are following their convictions. Again, I got to be careful. I'm not demonizing people who go left or right in their convictions. That's their convictions. Yeah. That's where I have grown, I feel like, in that terms of, that's just not me.
Right.
And I'm not going to apologize for that.
Well, till next time.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If so, I want you to make sure you subscribe to this channel, share it with a friend, put a comment from where you're from. We'd love to know where you're listening from or watching this from. And listen, if you need prayer for anything, we take that seriously. We'd love to pray with you. Submit a prayer request below. And lastly, go out, love, live, and lead like Jesus.